we're live. Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Method in Madness with me, Larry, and our guest, Dr. Onkar Ghate today. Uh, our topic is it possible? Is it possible to live as an individual? And when I was first thinking about this topic, well, hi, Dr. Ghate.
Hi, Ibis.
uh, when first thinking about this, Mike, interestingly enough, I feel like a lot of people think it comes natural to be an individual. It's kind of, you have no choice in it, and and they proceed from that thought process. I think uh, maybe quite well. Maybe you'll disagree, but I first wanted to ask: Do you think there's a key stake with this topic, with being an individual as opposed to something else, and what that something else could even be?
What I think is at stake, if you ask the question like that, is to be an individual, is I think, yeah, there's one sense in which everybody just is an individual because you have to use your own mind. No one else can operate it for you. Nobody can live your life. So, in that sense, everyone just is an individual, whether they like it or not. But at another level, it's are you going to fully embrace that fact or not? And I think there, many people, they're on the side of or not. So there's a sense in which they're an individual, but there's a sense in which they allow themselves, but it's the key is they allow themselves to be programmed by the people and environment around them. And in that sense, they're not really individuals, but that's as a result of a choice, I think or choices they're still making. And what life is about embracing the fact that you're an individual and becoming the individual that you want to be and not being programmed by what happens to be around you, whether it's like family, your education, your particular kind of social environment. So that's what I think is at stake in this.
I'm actually honing in on something you're saying that I think a lot of people kind of agree, but feel a little strange about. And I'll open it up with this common catchphrase that everybody hears. Human beings, we're a social animal. Sometimes we're a political animal. And you say people allow themselves to be programmed, and yet a lot would say around us is abundant evidence, especially because of technology, where we are programmed, and it's not just a matter of accepting it. Some people reject the program and still are operating off of it. So how is it that you can claim such a thing?
To say that someone's programmed by it, that you're programmed by advertising, you're programmed by what you see on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter, would mean that you don't have any choice involved. You can't think for yourself. You can't say, yeah, I agree with this, or I don't agree with this. I think this is right. I think it's wrong, or I think it's true. I think it's false. I think it's stupid. And that kind of decision impacts whether it gets into your mind in effect or not and becomes part of you. And if you really think, yeah, this is bad, and I think it's wrong, and I think it's false, and I think it's stupid, it doesn't become part of you. And so to say that you're programmed is not the same as saying, well, it's relevant what social environment and education you have. And so that's certainly relevant. Like if you've never been exposed to computers, you live in the 19th century, yeah, you're not going to become a computer programmer. You're not even going to think about like that as a career option. So, and that's because of the environment you're in. But that's not the same as saying your environment programs you. So it's relevant to what you can think about and what you do think about. But that's not the same as saying it decides what you think. And that's what I think it would really mean to say if you're programmed by it, not just that it's significant, but it's programming you. It's like you're not in control.
And
Kind of like what you just said. if it's not programmed, and it's through a choice in which we kind of absorb, external influences. Wouldn't people think that would be more of a like an individualistic thing? Kind of, I'm the one that's accepting these ideas. I'm choosing them. So it becomes me. It becomes a part of me as an individual.
Yeah, I mean, there is that individual element, but a person can make choices that where he's not really thinking about the things. So it's at once there's some individual authorship, but what he's authoring is I'm going to do what other people do. And I mean, I'm sure you've met people like this. So it's more that this is actually how they're operating, that they think, well, I've got to fit in and I've got to do what other people are doing. And it's terrifying to stand out in a crowd or to challenge received opinions. Like all my classmates or everybody in my family says X. I'm starting to think Y. It does take courage to say, yeah, no, I think something different. I'm going to say, and people make a choice often where, no, I'm going to, for the sake of the family, I'm going to fit in and I'm not going to say my piece. So, and there's some individual choice operating there, but the choice is really to submerge their individuality, to not voice what they are actually thinking or what they think is right, and to go along. And in that case, so there's once an individual element, but there's also a thwarting, I think, of the individuality.
There's something you mentioned that sounds a lot like what people would call commonly peer pressure, and how that operates in society and kind of the degree it affects certain people. But what I think, especially in my kind of research for this, a lot of people would there's this opinion that we kind of live in this age of individuality. Everybody is pushing that you express your individuality and being yourself. Some might say it's gone too far. This individualism, this stress on just ripping away from the crowd, and in some way, shape, or another, we need to get back to our roots in being an animal, a human animal, recognizing that we're part of this bigger, grander thing that we call planet Earth. Is there anything wrong in what they're saying, or do you think that there is an aspect of individuality today that is bringing about some good, or there's some good aspects of it?
I think there are good aspects of it today. There is still significant encouragement for people to think for themselves, to fashion their own life, particularly when you get to the level, for instance, of career. And that's more than just sort of the job you're going to hold, but like, what do you want to do with your life professionally? With the rise of the internet and Silicon Valley, there's a lot of talk of designing your career, that you don't just have to look, okay, this is what someone did, this is what it looks like to be an engineer, or this is what it looks like to be a doctor. So if that's what I'm interested in science, or I'm interested in medicine, I've got to do exactly what they did 30 years ago. Like in terms of the career trajectory, there's much more awareness now that you can design your life. And it's sometimes put like that, design your life or design your career. That's a legitimate sense of individuality. I think it's a good thing. The whole entrepreneurial mindset in a wider sense, I think has a real element of individuality. Like, what is it that I want to do? What am I interested in creating? Who do I want to work with, and so on. But there's also what you brought up. We can leave aside, we can come back to the issue of living for Mother Earth, or I forget exactly how you put it. That's a very different issue, I think. But there's also a false individuality in our culture that really, I think, is the flip side of conformity. And this is a perspective, you brought it up as peer pressure. In Ayn Rand's novels, she has a much deeper perspective on this. In The Fountainhead, it's put as first-handedness versus second-handedness. Part of what that means is really thinking for yourself versus, you can put it put it like this, reacting to what other people say, and in effect, them setting the terms. And then you can either conform and say, I'm going to do what other people do, think what they think, act how they act, support the same causes, oppose the same. Like if they all hate Trump, I have to hate Trump. If they all love Biden, I have to love Biden. So, and it's just going by what the crowd is doing. The flip side of that, which is not conformity, but it's essentially the same thing, is to oppose what other people are doing simply because they're doing it. And okay, so you're not conforming, but your whole frame of reference is still other people. And if they hate Trump, then I'm going to say I like Trump. If they love Biden, I'm going to say I don't like them. If they say, look, we're going to be extinct in 10 years if we don't address climate, I'm going to say, no, we don't have to address climate. But it's not real thinking. All it is a reaction to what other people are thinking. And that is like, it seems like, oh, this is an individual. He doesn't follow the crowd and so on. But he does follow the crowd. He just does the opposite of what the crowd's doing.
Now, when you talk about this individual, and we're navigating the world, right, as presented us, and you speak about these reactions we have, I see some saying, isn't it all just reactions? And more importantly, isn't it all just reactions from other people? You talk about an individual trying to form himself kind of independent of other people, but how could one evade the influence of others when we're swamped in it to the point where people question, is there any such thing as an original thought? And do we even have them? How do we know that it's even a valid thought? It's tainted by our own individual judgments.
Well, that's part of what thinking is. So there's a kind of equivocation on original thought here. To be an individual and to be thinking doesn't mean you have to think everything that you think is new, nobody's ever thought before. That's a little too much like the faux individualist, the guy pretending, I'm just going to do the opposite of what. So here it would be, if someone thinks this, then as an individual, I can't think it because that would be conformity. But conformity means that you're thinking it simply because the other person says so. Or if it's the whole crowd, like this is what my crowd or my social group thinks, therefore, and therefore it means that. So I decide this is what I'm going to think. But if you learn mathematics, there's a difference between parroting mathematics and you're sort of just in class and you're given formulas and you just spout out, even though you don't really, like, I don't get why the Pythagorean theorem is right, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but everybody says, and I get a good score on my test if I go through the motions. In effect, that's not real understanding. But if you go through the proof of what the Pythagorean theorem is, then you understand it and it's yours. You as an individual understand it. Doesn't mean no one's ever thought about the Pythagorean theorem before. So it's not, your thoughts don't have to be unique to you, but they have to be yours in that, which means you have to be convinced that this is true or this is right. And in the end, you're the only one who can judge that. Like, do I really think I've gone through the process to conclude, yeah, this is true or this is right? Or do I think I'm pretending to have gone through that process?
I could hear in your statement something that might be a little confusing when you say, when you use terms like prove and your individual thoughts coming to conclusions. Some would say, isn't it dangerous, Dr. Ghate, and isn't there evidence all around us of people kind of taking their own individual judgments, thinking they're the arbiter of truth, and running away with it, that has caused so much problems and in our society?
Well, what would you take as examples of that? Or what do you think people bring up if you ask them for examples of that? What will they say?
Most certainly, the way we think about politics, for example, the way, or even more notably, I think this one's even bigger, the way we think about what's right or wrong. that this one hits home for a lot of people, that, you know, how can we say most other cultures are right or wrong? How we're not in their shoes. We haven't lived their life. We haven't lived their experience. This also rolls into why we're not individuals, because we're part of this long tumbling chain of events, basically, we're people knocking into each other. How could we claim that we're kind of taking things into our own hands when we're essentially just carrying on the course of the progression of history?
Yeah, those are two different things. So let's take one at a time. If you bring up, yeah, and I think that is something people bring up, right? They bring up, like, how can you say another culture is better or worse? What they're doing is right or wrong? You can say it by reference to the reality and to the world, including human life in it. I'm in part have my dad's Indian, so I've seen Indian culture. Do I think there's some real problems with Indian culture? Yes, I do. But to take one that is pretty salient, women are still too often treated as second-class citizens. So, and that's like it's way more prestigious to go to these social peer pressure, conformity kinds of issues. It's way more prestigious still to have a son than a daughter. And I mean, they often are hoping that they will get a son. The son is treated more respectably in the family. And again, obviously, this is not now every Indian family, but this is part of the culture. And anyone who's lived in it has seen this aspect of it. I think there's something really defective in a culture that half of the people in it are treated as second-class citizens. That's not the same as saying, were there some reasons, perhaps understandable, still not true, but some reasons for why the culture evolves like this? And I think, yeah, there are. And you look at many cultures, and this is the norm, that women are treated as second-class citizens. It's part of why the whole issue of treating women as equals has been an issue around the world, because in most cultures, if you go back a certain period of time, that wasn't the viewpoint. And I think that viewpoint is wrong, even if it's understandable. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's for bad reasons. Sometimes it's for understandable, though I think not true reasons. And that, like, if you really take seriously that you can't evaluate, you can't criticize, you can't judge other cultures, then on something like this, you would have to say, oh no, it's equally good that half your population, all the women, are treated as second-class citizens. And if you are willing to go down that road, there's nothing about cultures. You can't judge anything. Everything's the equal of everything else, just because, well, this is what somebody did. And that's not true. And if you remove the issue of political correctness and kind of peer pressure that you're not supposed to judge other cultures, so nobody thinks this. Nobody thinks that every culture is equal in every respect.
And go ahead, Kylie.
I mean, I would say the way they think about it is that cultures are equal on the ground that they are unique to them, and in that there's no universal standard to apply these cultures to say, okay, this culture is less than this culture. They're all equal in the same playing field. They're just differing forms. So when you judge another culture, again, it goes back to what Ibis says earlier. Your judgment is tainted by your culture or your type of influence from others people. So how could you still apply and say, well, this culture isn't so much, right in that sense?
Well, tainted is question begging. So, I mean, it's obviously a negative. You're tainted by this. If you just said your views informed by what you think, that's true. But the question is what you think, is it true or not, or is it false? And then you could say, well, you're tainted by falsehoods. But the mere fact that you're using other of your ideas that's not a taint. That's how you think. So when you look at other cultures, I look at them from the perspective, how conducive are they to an individual living his life? And I would rather live in, take two cultures that I think are good, ancient Greece and modern America. I'd rather, like, if I was, if you take something like Rawls's Veil of Ignorance, so you don't know the specifics of where you'll be in society and so on. Would I pick modern America or ancient Greece? I'd pick modern America. The individuals are free in modern America. And treated equally before the law. In ancient Greece, yeah, if you're part of the aristocracy, then you have a certain quality of life, but most of the people are workers or slaves and so on. And from the perspective of how conducive is it to an individual living and having the ability to live if he chooses, that's one of the ways I look at cultures, and they vary. And I don't think that's not a taint, that this is the way that I look at cultures, even though it's true that it's something I've learned. So I didn't know it when I was born. And it's something I've learned in modern culture, that one of the advancements is for them to, for it to be thought more widely that individuals are all capable. So it's not, you don't divide the people up into the aristocracy and the commoners, or men and women, and think, well, yeah, one counts and one doesn't count, or white and black. And so that's an achievement of modern culture, but I regard it as knowledge. It's not just a prejudice. It's certainly not a taint. And that's what you use your knowledge to evaluate other cultures. How else would you evaluate them?
I wanted to key on something, and it's in a super chat, and I can bring it together with another thing I was thinking from Robert Nasir. He says, why do they always teach us that it's easy and evil to do what we want, and that we need to discipline and restrain ourselves? And I was, when you mentioned things being conducive, a lot of people have the position that what's easy is to think about ourselves and be an individual. And you just mentioned some great times in history where a lot would say that the greatness of it, the essential greatness of it, was the ability to recognize that individuality was recognizing that you are more than just yourself. You care about other people. You do interact with other people. And that's the challenge that we have to work at. That's why this whole individual thing is it's like the easy part. The hard part is, how do we deal with fixing our relationships with others? Because that's what humanity has failed at for so long and struggled through with some small advances.
I think both are hard and both are an achievement. So from the flip side, I think it's false to say we've succeeded with one, but haven't succeeded with the other. And it's really two aspects of the same thing. So there's a reason either like you achieve both or you're struggling with both. To become an individual is to form your own thoughts and your own values, and to be convinced. So this is part of why Ayn Rand puts it as first-hand versus second-hander. To be convinced by your first-hand judgment, not, yeah, this is what I think and this is what I value because other people do. It's, I see why this is true and I see why it's valuable. And to do the thinking, to put in the work that you're convinced of it. That's not a given. And if anything, most people default to, yeah, this is hard. And so a shortcut is, can someone tell me what to do? Can someone tell me what to believe, what I should do with my life, what I should pursue, what's right and what's wrong? It's precisely because it's hard that a default is, yeah, this is too hard. Let someone else tell me. But you can't have genuine relationships with other people if you're not a person yourself. So there's a line, this super chat question is coming from the Fountainhead. And there's a line in the Fountainhead that's often quoted. And it's, to say I love you, one must first know how to say the I. And it's because when you have genuine relationship with other people, and it doesn't always have to be love, but if you like someone, you value someone, you want to work with them, you want to do something productive and that's mutually valuable, that is, so you both think of it's valuable, it is, you have to be able to say, like, what is valuable and why? What's valuable to me and why? Let me see if it's also to the other person. Let me engage in a real exchange where it's value for value, a real trade. But if you don't know what's valuable to you, and this is what it means to have a real individuality, to be a first-hander, is you would know what you think and what you value and why. And that's a precondition to having real relationships with other people. What happens when a person has not done that kind of work, I think often relationships become an attempt to fill a void. So they don't really know what they think, what they value, and they're hoping the other person will fill that for them. So just in the more kind of impersonal circumstances, a person can decide, yeah, it's going to be my priest who's going to tell me what I should really value and what values are. It's going to be my teacher and so on. But in the more personal realm, it becomes my friends and social circles. But it's not a real exchange. It's that they're filling a void for you, and they're hoping you're going to fill the void for them. Like, they don't know what to do either. So maybe you can tell me what to think and what to do. And it's the projection that you get in the fountainhead, which I think is accurate. It's like you've got a bunch of zeros. He doesn't know what he thinks or what he values. He's hoping someone else will tell him, but vice versa. And it's a vast emptiness that's not what real, genuine relationships look like.
I keyed in on something you said there that really, I think, would strike a nerve with people. And I saw this presented a lot, where it's almost as if what you said was, you claim that people almost can't be happy unless they're being an individual. And like, you gave the example of your experience with Indian culture. I have, in my personal experience, with a lot of Black culture, even African culture. By Black, I mean American, more Black American experience. By Africa, more international experience, and even Caribbean. And a lot of people, there's this even big movement now of, we are finding happiness, true happiness, and even ourself. We're discovering this concept of I, like you spoke of, by going back into our social roots, what people would call our roots as a group, as a people, in those traditions that we have, that we've set up. And that's where we find this true happiness. To find ourselves, you have to really find, they'll put it, where your spirit comes from, where your energy comes from, and how it's flowing through you. Okay, go ahead.
And to really concretize what he's kind of saying here, it's more so this Marcus Garvey type of view. We have to go back to our homeland to connect with our, what he's just said, social roots. And because of, Westerners, I don't want to make about a history too much, but because of Westerners and slavery, they kind of disconnected from our social, historical roots. So I want to put it that way to concretize.
I didn't want to pile on here, Doctor, but I don't want to forget this example. Not even going just back to our social roots. Recently, my uncle, he went to the Black History Museum, and he spoke of it like he had this euphoric kind of experience, getting into this mode of realizing who he is and where he comes from. Are you saying that he's wrong about that? Is that not a true feeling of joy, happiness, pleasure?
He's at least partly wrong, I think. The other cases, I think, are more obviously wrong. I would put the basic issue is how to think about your identity. And is your personal identity tied to the past? And I think the answer to that philosophically is no. The answer people often give is yes. But I think that is in part, it's again something trying to fill a real or imagined void that I don't think it's tied to the past. Your identity, what makes you you, is what you think and what you value. And the way that, not just sort of what you would say in conversation that you think and what you would say you value, but how you actually live. So how those ideas actually manifest or don't. And then it's sort of, you're pretending that this is what I think, but it's not actually, because it's not how you act. So what you think and what you value and how that gets translated into action, that's what makes a person. And when you're trying to figure out, like, what is this new person I'm encountering? So what you're trying to figure out is, what ideas do they have? What values do they have? And how does that inform their day-to-day lives? And that has nothing to do with what happened 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Where do they happen to have come from geographically or genetically? None of that. But the more we're bombarded with the idea, and this is what, Ibis, you brought up this in a different kind of way before, the idea that we're determined by our circumstances, and really in the end it means by our past. And we have to trace things even before we were born, and where did our ancestors come from, and where do they come from, and so on. The more someone thinks, yeah, everything I think and value, that's the source, then to really understand themselves, yeah, I have to go back and I have to go back. But that's not the source of a person's ideas or values. And that our culture pushes this, I think, is really detrimental to people's sense of a proper identity and to their happiness. I mean, I'm sure you've seen these commercials where people do the genetic testing, and they find out, oh yeah, I'm 1/16 Scottish and I didn't know it. And now they start wearing kilts. And that's crazy. I mean, I really think it's crazy. Either you think kilts are worth wearing and wear one even if you don't have 1/16% Scottish, or you think kilts are impractical or stupid and don't wear them. And it doesn't matter if you have 1/16 blood, that you have some ancestor who was born in Scotland. But so there's a real surrendering, I think, in the end, and people are pushed to, it doesn't matter what you think. And if you think kilts are stupid, that doesn't matter, because you've got an ancestor who was born in Scotland, so you should value kilts. That's not the way to look at the world and to look at oneself. But the more people are pushed that it's, so I guess I can't think for myself and so on, then they're sent, like, where do I find a sense of personal identity? And they'll try to find it in the past and in their roots. Now, the case you brought up about going to so was this the museum in Washington that
Yes.
he went to? Yeah.
Yes.
It depends what a person's responding to, I think. And it might not even be clear or fully clear to them what they're responding to. There is an element, a real element, I think, of the history of Blacks in America has been distorted, not told, whitewashed. And so I haven't seen the whole museum, but I've seen the first floor. It's pretty big and there's a lot to see. So I've spent a lot of time the first time I went on the first floor. I found it very interesting and inspiring from the perspective of, here's our stories that are worth telling that haven't been told. And if that's what you're responding to, but then sort of the culture's pushing, well, but the way to think about that is my ancestors are being recognized and my identity comes from my tradition. That's wrong to think of it like that, but it need not be what the person's actually responding to. And it might be just, this is what they're told the meaning of their response is. And I don't think it actually, or at least not necessarily the meaning of their response. So I would want to know more about what I think you said it was your uncle.
Yeah.
What he's actually responding to and what did he actually find powerful in the museum before having any kind of even like provisional judgment about it.
Interestingly enough, well, he was actually directly born in Barbados, and if you trace the family line back, I guess it does get back to Africa somehow, but that's what he was keying on, which was strange to me. Like this is what my people have gone through like literally, and he even bridges that connection over, you know, a geographical area. That so but this kind of, and I'm glad you had a modern example. I was going to bring up the example of everybody laughed at I don't know if you're familiar with the Fast and Furious franchise. There's a are you?
I've seen a little bit. I'm not. I wouldn't call
You
myself familiar.
I know where you're
you
going.
yeah, you probably have seen it enough to get this joke about it. That it's funny that it took this long for people to get it. But the joke going on now is the fact that the whole plot, the whole theme of the movie hinges on the fact that he's doing it for family. Like at the end of the day, it's just for family. And to me, and I don't know how other people think about this, but I noticed this everywhere in movies and TV show that the whole thing rests on family. And then maybe this is too dark, but on a darker note, on looking up this topic, I found a lot of people kind of almost saying that this is a issue, is individuality, what it makes you think, and then how it kind of proliferates this suicide thought in certain people. And the key to bringing it back is this family thing, other people. And that's what almost gives human life meaning. The fact that we can recognize that there's others that we can bond with. Is that not like a powerful individual view, or is something wrong there? I know that was a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something wrong, but I'm not sure I fully get it. But I would sort of what you're bringing up, or what these people are bringing up, the social relationship and other people are a huge value. So there is something right in the recognition of these are huge values. I mean, just think how much time you spend either with friends and lovers and loved ones, or searching for friends and a romantic partner and so on. I mean, you spend a lot of time in your life doing that. And I think, I mean, if someone does it properly, it's time well spent. So these are enormous values, but there's a big difference when you bring up like it's for the family and we have to do it for, of whether you're subordinating yourself to these things. And that I think is really wrong. So if it's my family, right or wrong, and I might think half of them are crazy, I might even think like some of them are really bad, they're criminals or whatever. But no, you can't judge that because it's the family and that supersedes everything. That's a massive loss of your individuality, because now it's, yeah, I don't think this person's good, but I'm either going to pretend or start ignoring the things I see that I don't like, because if I keep looking at him, I'm really going to hate this guy. So I just don't tell me what he's doing. Don't tell me that my uncle is stealing from his employer or whatever. Don't tell me, because it's the family and I have to have a good view of the family. And the more I know, the more I'm not going to have a good view. And that's a real erasing of yourself from it's, yeah, I'm not going to think, I'm not going to look at things, I'm not going to judge. And when that's often when people press it as, yeah, but it's the family that's really important, it means the individual's not important. And a proper view is, no, the individual is important, but one of the things to a real individual that is of importance is finding other people, but other people you like and can respect and can admire and want to spend time with, which means you have to judge them. It's not other people right or wrong. It's I'm looking for people who I think are right and good, and that's who I want to spend time with.
Do I hear you saying that a true individual or individualism proper almost rests upon recognizing that it's the individual's own perspective that really has to kind of guide everything and gives everything its almost worth?
What do you mean by perspective? It's the individual's own perspective.
Because you say that we can't lose track, this idea of family, right? We know that everybody would say it's important to have a family, and a family is what we search for. Everybody does it, they'd say. But it seems like you want to change the perspective to that you have to recognize that it's you valuing the family first. You have to judge your family, which is like you kind of alluded to is a no go, and that's kind of what I was trying to bring up in my example is this idea that uh, the family unit is unquestionable, and the example I was trying to use kind of shows how people almost make it one of the highest virtues that can save anything. It can make the bad guy a likable character. It's commonly used. The way you make the bad guy likable is he cares about his family. He's doing it all for his family.
Yes. Yeah. And it's the family transcending or supposedly transcending the individual. And it is important to judge your family and family members and to judge them as individuals. And it's not easy to do that as a young child, but as a child develops, the more that you have to do that. And so judging doesn't mean denouncing. There's such a thing as positive judgments of thinking, like, I admire this person, I respect this, or whether it's your mother, your father, a cousin, an uncle, an aunt, but of finding things like that and saying, yeah, like, this is the reason I like this person. I'm glad they're part of the family. I'm glad to spend time with them. That's part of what judging means. So it doesn't just mean looking for the bad things. It means looking for the good things and looking for the bad things. And both are important to understand. It's like, say you've had good parents, to start to think of them as an individuals and not just like, they're my parents, they did what they had to do, their duty of raising me, but of recognizing, no, they're individuals and they approached this in the right way. And they really took time to think about, like, what was good for my development and so on. And that's all positive. That it increases your respect and love for your parents, to think of them as individuals who had choices. It wasn't automatic that they were good parents and so on. This is part of the work they put in. But similarly, if you have, I mean, imagine you've been brought up by a parent who's abusive and physically abusive. That's already a significant harm, but it's even more harmful if you're absorbing the idea, and I can't judge him or her as bad. Like, what they're doing is wrong. No, it's part of the family. Who are you to judge your parents and so on? That adds insult to injury, and it does real harm to people. And it's liberating for them to think, oh no, I mean, I guess my father's just an individual like other individuals, and he's doing something really bad. And that is so the idea that you don't judge family members, both positively and negatively, is, I think, very detrimental to a person's life and his ability to live it and to seek out good things and avoid bad things.
I think there's, oh, go ahead.
I think there's a point that Ibis said that made me kind of think of a point, kind of like where the bad guy can be presented as good because he's doing it for the sake of the family, or the family, regardless if they're bad or not. They're the family. You have to respect them or whatnot. And it kind of reminds me of this essay, and I believe it's in the Objectivist. I believe it's called Altruism as Moral Appeasement. And Rand in that essay essentially says that people kind of give up their mind to unwanted buyers, right? People who are uninterested buyers, more specifically. And the idea that certain people think that society or family has such a right or already demand that you have to represent them or be kind of another form of them, and that's why she calls it altruism as moral appeasement, because you're appeasing to them, and you appease to the people that you actually resent because you're not being an individual as you would like to be. You're being them.
I mean, in that essay, part of what she's dealing with is it's true that it's altruism as moral appeasement, though the title is just altruism as appeasement, but she's talking about moral appeasement there, and that it's that someone is given permission to use their mind. And the wider phenomenon you're touching on, Larry, I think, is that there's this kind of exchange that's not a real exchange, where it's, yeah, if I say that, yeah, the family counts above all, and so, and when, particularly when we're in crisis, we have to circle the wagons and everyone defend everyone, and so then I'll allow you some individuality and you can go your own way sometimes, so long as you acknowledge that when push comes to shove, it's all about the family, and that's rock bottom. And so, and people do make a bargain like that. I think that is a bargain they shouldn't not make, because they're not actually getting anything in return. That's they're just appeasing a viewpoint that's wrong. And there's no, I mean, maybe in a real primitive time when we lived in tribes, there was an issue of like, don't question your tribe and so on. But there's no such issue today. And the fact that you can and you should question your family and evaluate it, both positive and negative, and you can go then your separate way. And it's like that fear of, can I really go my separate way and the family's going to hate me and so on, that's kind of what people appease, that they say, no, I don't have the courage to do that. So yeah, I'll say the family counts as long as you give me some slack, that I can sometimes do my own thing, in effect.
I think there's a great intersection on that. I wanted your comments that we have here that I wanted your comment on. We are talking about heroes. The kind of, well, I was trying to bring it to these heroes in stories. And I was just getting into Anthem, Ayn Rand's novel. And when I read a little excerpt on it, apparently it's about the concept I, and almost in a way, I think a lot of people reading all of her novels would see that a lot of them involve this concept, this I, or this individuality. But a lot of people's takeaway is all of her characters, all of her heroes are struggling in some way or another with other people. They appreciate other people. Even in Anthem, where it's supposedly this society around that's at the ultimate end of completely wiping out the individual, right? She even uses the word equality in there, which to bring it to today is a big word that it is individuality requires equality, and that's all we're asking for. Is there a connection between the way she depicts her heroes and their individuality, their I-ness, that's different, that's missing in today's depiction of the heroic view?
And what are you putting? So today's depiction of the heroic view is that it's motivation by family, by the group, by others.
And I'd also throw in there a willingness to, and a key word here, a willingness to sacrifice for those others, or particularly what they mean is to give up something that is important to you to for the sake of other people, to kind of go outside yourself in your scope of action. And that really, to the point where, like I tried to point, it can save the bad guy. It makes the best good guys. It's everywhere from each perspective. So
that is for sure part of what she's challenging. So the idea that you should live for others, and that means subordinate yourself, your interest, your values, what you think and what you want to others, and whether it's the family or whether it's your social group or the gang you're in, or it's your political party that you have to subordinate everything to, and you don't like who's they've nominated as the leader, but no, we've got to all band together and put aside your differences and your opposing view. That she rejects completely. I mean, so part of what it means to have an I or a self is precisely to hold fast to what you actually think, to what you actually value, and not to give them up to other people. That's very different than saying don't interact with other people, don't look for friends, don't look for lovers, don't look for romantic partners. You should do all of that. But a proper relationship is not you give and others take, or the other way around, that you take and others give. So one of the ways she puts it is that a proper conception of yourself and of life, and a proper conception of equality, another thing you mentioned, is you should view yourself and the other person as equals. You're both after your own life and happiness and making the most of the time you have on earth. And so your relationship with another person should be, you can put it, it should be mutually beneficial, is one way Ayn Rand often puts it. In today's culture, that will often be described as win-win. And that's what you're looking for. So it's not you're a servant, slave, you're subordinate, or vice versa. The other person is not subordinate to you. It's you should be advancing your interests, values, and the other person should. And again, like if you think of a friendship or a romantic relationship, and when one party starts to realize, I'm not sure I get anything from this. I'm not sure for a friend, like we have anything in common. I don't really like spending time with him. So that's the end of the friendship. It's not, oh yeah, but I should be subordinate to the other person. And it's like, what does it matter that if I like being in this friendship, as long as the other person thinks, like, that's not how anybody thinks about a friendship or a love affair. And that's right that they don't think of it like that.
Go ahead, Kobe.
Yeah, I have a really interesting concrete. Like about a minute ago when you were talking about, taking and giving, I'll put it this way. Shouldn't we all just come into the world and leave the world as a better place than it was before we came in? So pretty much we just come in and do everything we can and give everything and just leave it better than how it was when we came in.
Well, why?
Well, I was gonna do a little addendum to that. I was gonna actually do a little addendum to that to give the why that they would give, because it's, I don't think a lot of people would say this explicitly, but because it's the only thing that could really, really, really have meaning in that long stretch of life. Because you come from, wherever you don't know, and you're leaving and you don't know where you're going. So at least, it's almost like at least you could do is leave something for us, man. I mean, like, almost like they'd say, you couldn't give me a better argument, than at least you could leave something for everybody here. Like, come on, what are you, a jerk?
Well, no, I got one. So I'll put it this way. So, I mean, well, no one's really a true individual. I mean, Onkar, you drive, right? So you have to depend on the roads. I mean, you are in public education. You are inside of a room that was built by other people. No one's really a true individual. So when you come into the world, you gain all this value by everybody else. And at least thing that you could do is not be so selfish and reap all the values. What you could do is just leave here by leaving us something so we can further the new generation.
Or at least leave it for your kids, your family, I think some people would say.
But that's too selfish.
There's something true in this and something very objectionable. And particularly this last aspect and that is, I mean, it is often brought up as other people paid for the roads and paid for the public school you went into. And so you owe everybody. The idea that you can make other people as having unwilling debts. So it wasn't like we had a contract and I said, yeah, okay, I'll drive on the roads and you pay for this and so on. And then I owe you. And so it's a bunch of people voted that we won't have private schools, we won't have private roads, we're going to make it all government funded. And then the people who didn't vote, they might not have been born at the time. It's now you all owe us. That this idea of collecting debts like this that are unchosen, I think there's something really wrong with that. But it is true that we all benefit from values that other people created. So, I mean, one of the reasons it's better to be born in the US than in parts of Africa is you have much more ready access to wealth and knowledge that have been created, discovered, produced than you do if you were born in some parts of Africa. And that's like, I'm grateful to have been born in, I was born in Canada, but to be born in Canada, then just go back to India, to parts of India, where it's just, it's much less education and much less wealth, and life is a lot harder as a result. And you should feel gratitude. That's not the same as you have a debt, but you should feel gratitude to the people who forged ahead, discovered new things, made new things. And it is true that because of the way that human beings survive, we survive by thinking and then by making stuff. So we're not like the birds who pick up seeds from the ground that plants have dropped or berries in the trees and so on, and we sort of just gather up what happens to be there. Human beings, we make the new. We're inventive creatures, and that's both knowledge and all kinds of wealth. Like it's actually a trackball. Most people have a mouse, but the trackball. Nice, like, I didn't find this in the forest and pick it up. It's people made this. And so it is true that if you're really dedicated to your own life, it means you're dedicated to thinking and to producing stuff. The consequence is that you do leave the world a better place. But your motivation and goal is not to leave the world a better place. The motivation and goal is to advance my life, which I do by thinking and producing. But it's true, a side benefit of that is people can build on what was achieved before. They can use the ideas that people had and the money and wealth and build on it. So like when a Steve Jobs dies, I don't think what gave meaning to his life was, oh yeah, 5 generations from now, the world will be better. I mean, he's dead. What does he get from 5 generations from now? He gets absolutely nothing. But it's true because he was a thinker and producer that he left things for people to build on. I mean, he's the person who brings in the smartphone, and now people are doing all kinds of new things with smartphone, new apps, TikTok, and so on, that he may not have envisioned, but he paved the way for that. But that's very different than saying that his purpose and what gives meaning to his life is what happened generations after he died.
Now, we have a very short amount of time here, but would it be correct to say for things like gratitude, happiness, pleasure, a lot of things we discussed, family, a good relationship, and you correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of what you said makes it seem like to truly, consistently, and fully even take part in those experiences and for them to mean something, it's almost required that you have to be an individual and recognize that you're an individual. Is that proper to say?
Yeah, I think that's part of what we've been talking about and part of the way to approach life. And it's just a widening of the point. To say I love you, one first must know how to say the I. It's to benefit from anything, you have to be you. That is a real individual with ideas, values, interests. And then you can look at the world and say, what actually advances? Like, what will help me understand more things? What will help me reach my values? What will help me reach my interests? And then things actually have significance to you, both negative and positive. Like this person, yeah, I would want to be friends with them or a business partner with them or in a romantic relationship with them. And these people I want to avoid. But if there's not a real self there, then you don't have any real ideas or values. It's just secondhand. It's just what you're getting from the culture. And then there's not a perspective that you can really say, so what would advance his ideas, his values, his interests? Because he doesn't have ideas or values, or it's just been filled by what other people think. And that's this idea. It's like it's a shell of a person, and then you can't really talk about like what would advance their interest or they're happy. Like what would make them happy? There's a real sense in which there's nothing would because there's nothing there yet that they really think and value. And then you can say, is that being advanced or hindered?
So I guess it's more so proper, because we didn't really touch on it throughout the whole show. It shouldn't take much more than maybe 2 minutes. But end off on the proper view on what is an individual? What does being an individual look like? How do we become an individual and function as an individual? How do we do that, Dr.
Ghate? So that is there's a lot to say and discuss about that.
yeah.
But the basic, the one piece of advice I would give is, if I'm only giving one, is think for yourself. But that really means think for yourself. What do you actually think is true? Not what are you supposed to think is true, not what will people either laugh at you or criticize you or defriend you or deplatform you if you think, but what do you actually think? And the more you do that, the more you form your own ideas and your own values, and then you can call them your own.
You want to read the donations?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So which one? So you already read the one.
I read the second one from Robert
Nasir. Okay. So we have two from Mary. She says, well, it's a $5 one, and she says, it's patronizing and demeaning to suggest we can't think for ourselves. Politicians use our supposed inability to grab power.
Any thoughts on that, Dr. Ghate?
I mean, it relates to the determinism issue we were talking about before. The more you tell people they're determined, the more they feel out of control. Like it's, I don't determine things. I'm not in control. Something else is. And then they look for people to tell them what to think and what to do. And one place they look is to politicians, political leaders. So there is a connection between.
This is real quick. I just thought about something. Could you say something real quick, Dr. Ghate, on what's the proper way to think about getting information from other people? Because that's a big thing today. Just as from an individualist perspective, how do we, when we're looking through our Facebook feed, our Twitter, or this or that?
Well, again, there's a lot to say there, but one is to think, am I being given arguments and evidence, or am I being given conclusions? And to be persuaded is to have arguments and evidence and that's part of what it means to be first-handed. It is, I can see why this conclusion is right, and I can see it now firsthand because you've given me arguments and evidence, not here's a conclusion and you're stupid if you don't believe it or something like that. That's not an argument. So one is to think about arguments and evidence. And the other is just to think, it's related. It's what puts the person in the position to know this? Why do they even think they know this? And you'll be surprised how often your answer is, they don't know anything.
It gets a little scary, especially when there's PhDs attached to the name.
That's the scariest. And then we have another donation from Mary to $2 one. She says, why don't they hold the climate summit in Gambia? I think that's
pertaining to when we mentioned when you mentioned Africa and how much of a better standpoint we have being born in America, and I think this is supposed to juxtapose the claim that we care about everything, we care about everybody so much. One of the highest virtues is taking care of everybody, as it's what's the word? Proliferated today is the view. Mm-hmm. Yet, and I guess the comment's supposed to kind of point out, like, how come they don't actually hold their summits and their movements in places where it's actually affecting them the worst? Maybe there's a connection there, could you say, of kind of the group think versus individual think and missing the essentials? Is there a connection between that?
Well, what do you mean by that? You
like,
seem to think there's
because the motivating factor, it would seem, to the view that holds like climate summits or have you are very important things and very important activities. In fact, They're essential activity today. The big thrust behind it, even take vaccine mandates, the big thrust behind our environment naturally and socially is because we have to care about not even just other people, but the other things, the other organisms in the world, because we inhabit it. This is all our planet. We share it together. And it's what could be a more unquestionable axiom than taking care of that?
Yeah. So is there an element, if I get what you're saying, so there's an element of show where they want to be seen as, we care about this, we're doing something about this, regardless of if they actually care about it or doing something about it. But that's part of it. It's in the eyes of other people that it's, you can't accuse us of not caring because look at what we're doing. And they want approval. It's approval seeking. It's for what they're not interested in is, are we doing actually anything that is combating climate? No, what we're doing is having a summit in a very prominent way that people can say, oh yeah, you must be doing something regardless of what they're doing. So I think it was part kind of trying to point out hypocrisy in the viewpoint, but part of what goes on for these kinds of things is the crucial thing is to be seen as caring. This is the kind of view that perception trumps reality. And there is a real element of show, which is why they're holding it in a very prominent place in Europe and so on, where they can have all the cameras and all the reporting and so on.
It almost seems as if kind of groupthink enables or incentivizes the kind of phony show. So I think that's a very interesting point in of itself. Did you have anything else to say, Dr. Ghate, or do you think we got the essentials is the way I'd put it? Do we miss an essential that's very important?
Well, no. So we've touched on some of, I think, the crucial issues in regard to individuality. We didn't touch on some of the social forces at work. So we touched broadly peer pressure and so on, but we didn't. So, for instance, we talked more about family and how that is supposedly connected to one's identity. Another big element is how people think religion is connected to their identity. And that too is, there's something really wrong with the way we're taught to think about that. And in terms of my identity is tied to my religion, which again means the religion of my ancestors, usually, and that there's something really wrong with that perspective as well.
Could we? I mean, I think we should just do the last donation that was quite recent and kind of, put it to a closing. So Mary did another $2 donation. She says sarcasm and irony in reference to our comments in her latter question. But
I can close it up with a personal note as well.
Sure. Yeah.
I wanted to say I'm actually really going through the novels right now. Especially based off, I had a conversation with you. One of the first time we met, Dr. Ghate, was me asking about reading these fiction novels. And just for anybody out there, I must say, battling, one of the most fun parts of reading all the novels is having this kind of internal battle, this internal thinking process of, what about that is individual? Am I building this character? Am I the hero that I want to see right now? Am I acting as if I want to be that hero? What does he look like? What does the outside world look like? Even how to deal with it when the world is really against that. And I think for a lot of people, especially, it was a little unnerving to find so much stuff about suicide when I Googled this topic. These books really, really, I'm not going to say they're a magic cure, but I can't find a better source of giving you an actual courtroom, as I put it, to actually kind of work this stuff out internally with yourself. So, yeah. Anything on that to Dr. Ghate? Because you're way more versed on the novels than I.
I think that's right. And it's a good perspective to bring in. If you relate it to the suicide, issue. I'm actually surprised that you came across so much about suicide in Googling this, but there is this issue. It's something that Jordan Peterson, for instance, talks a lot about. And I think he's met young people who've been contemplating suicide and so on. This is one aspect of sort of his
can
resonating.
I give you something to springboard off of it, if I can?
Yeah.
One of the main things I found, interestingly enough, is people getting fed when they're having these kind of depressive thoughts, the idea that you should live for other people. And these people were kind of angry, like, bro, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Everybody's telling me that, and it doesn't work no matter how much I try and force it. And I already don't like myself. So telling me to like myself, it's like a lose-lose for these people. But
yeah. And there's a real attempt and a real struggle for people to find purpose and meaning in life. And it's a real struggle in part because the way we've been taught about this is wrong. And you're going to find purpose and meaning through subordinating yourself to other people or subordinating yourself to your religion and to your faith and to your God. And that's the aspect.
I found Jesus now. I feel so much better now. It was amazing.
Ayn Rand's very interested in that question of where do you find purpose and meaning? But her answer is very different than all these. You're not going to find it outside of yourself in this kind of way, but you're also not going to find it inside yourself if all that means is sort of looking for something. You have to create this and take the responsibility to actually build meaning and purpose in your life. And you can do that. And you don't have to be wedded to traditions and to your ancestors. Usually the heroes in our novels, you don't even learn very much about their backstory because they consider it irrelevant. Like, I'm looking forward and how am I going to build something that I view as purposeful and meaningful? And I have reasons to think that. That's what the novels are about. And for anyone who's struggling with this, yeah, they're very interesting from that perspective and just of thinking of one's own life from the way she's looking at life.
I think that's a beautiful ending point there, and I'll say I'll throw a little shameless plug here. One of the best ways to get started on that is subscribing to this channel, hitting the notification bell. Most importantly, to stay tuned with this type of stuff, because I imagine in the future we're going to get really deep into this stuff, and I want to bring in more of my own personal examples because this topic I see it every day, and I think it's a very good point for us to get engaged in because people are battling with this on the ground, despite all the political mess. And this has been great. Thank you, Dr. Ghate.
Thanks.
That has been episode 3 of Method and Madness. You can check us out every single Monday. And I'll see you guys next Monday.
See you next Monday.
See you guys.